do another one on this? Mr. Chair, there's just a couple of things.
The member has one call remaining.
One call remaining. Okay, well, there are just a couple of things I want to say, and I want to talk about the title and commencement about this, because we've done the serious stuff. But you know what? I think we should call this the Commando Bill. And the reason I say we call this the Commando Bill, Mr. Chair, is because this is slipping something under the cover of night to screw soldiers. So I think that's what we do, the Commando Bill. And you know, the most disappointing thing is Mr. Andrew Bailey, or I should say Colonel Bailey, who was actually a colonel in the army, has stood up and said, "Oh, don't worry, this is only small and inconsequential." Well, I pity that bloke the next time he has to turn up on the parade ground, or worse, at the RSA in a couple of weeks, and explain to the veterans that this is only minor, because this is not minor. This is not minor. I think we should also call this the All Show No Style Bill. And the reason I say that, Mr. Chair, is because everyone wants to do something to improve the housing market. Everyone wants to do something to allow young people to buy the homes. And yet this is what this government has come up with. After 7 years, this is the best they can do. And the officials told us it may help 200 or 300 people. That's fantastic for 200 or 300 people, but it's not the 90,000 young people that the government keeps crying on about. In fact, the officials took such a lackadaisical approach to this that they said they hadn't even modelled it. And I don't blame them, because I think they did what we did. They had a look at it, they read it and went, "Oh my God, this is one of those election promises we're just going to have to do because the government wants to do it." Now, we are voting for it, Mr. Chair, and the reason we are voting for this bill is because the officials actually said, and these are their words, not mine, the officials actually said, well, it does no harm to anyone. So we're now passing legislation because it does no harm. Well, I would suspect that is not a great reason to pass legislation. I think you're right, we have much better things to do than pass pieces of legislation that don't do harm. I would have thought that the government would have a sort of legislative agenda that it had under the busy Minister Simon Power, when we had substantial pieces of legislation on the order paper. It has gone down, or had substantial pieces of legislation that actually made a real difference to good, hard-working Kiwis. But not just good, hard-working Kiwis, good, hard-working young Kiwis who still hold that dream of home ownership, who still believe that it is possible. Now, if they live in the regions, or if they live in the regions, they've got to have a 20% deposit. This is not going to give them the 20% deposit. The Honourable Nick Smith stood up here and he said, well, if you do this, you're going away from home, you've got this amount of money, you may end up with $50,000. And if you do that and you get a 10% deposit, and under this sort of scenario, there might be 5 people in the country that qualify for this, you can get a $450,000 loan. But Mr. Chair, to service a $450,000 loan, to come under bank sort of covenants, you need to have a household income of about $175,000. There aren't that many young people, apart from maybe our chief, there aren't that many young people, Mr. Chair, who actually have a household income of $175,000. As Mr. Hipkins said, they're worrying about how they're going to put food on the table, how they're going to pay for the bill to fix the car, what they're going to do with their children, let alone can I service a debt of $450,000? So this is really tinkering around the edges. In fact, that's not a bad name as well. A tinkering around the edges bill while Rome burns. And that's not a great metaphor, because we don't want to see anyone burning, but I'll tell you what, a lot of people are suffering. And the thing that really distresses me is I wonder if my 4 children are ever going to be able to afford a home. I wonder what it's going to be like in 30 years. But there is one way that they will be able to, Mr. Chair. There's one way, and that is if there's a Labor government in 2017 and they start dealing with the issues that are important to New Zealanders. And the one thing that this whole debate has really sort of honed for me, has really sort of it's solidified, cemented my views around this, is that party believes that the market has the absolute solutions. This party believes that the government has a role to play in actually helping good, hard-working Kiwis. And I would argue, if you look at the Auckland housing market, that the market has failed good, hard-working Kiwis who all they want to do is own a home, have a beer at the end of the day, get on with life, and not have these massive money problems. And because, of course, the thing is, Mr. Chair, if they're not paying off their mortgage, they're paying off someone else's mortgage through rent, and they just cannot get on that property ladder. Mind you, having said that, there are going to be a whole lot of developers, by the sounds of things, with a whole lot more houses that they've just bought off the government. Thank you very much.
I call Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Chairman.